Do your drawings look a little off sometimes? One easy way to sketch better proportions is using the grid drawing method. You can use this directly on the surface you're drawing or painting on and then erase the grid afterwards. But I like using a separate piece of craft paper and then transferring the sketch onto the canvas. I'm painting on a bigger canvas this time, so I have to tape together 4 A4 size pieces of craft paper for the sketch. Making sure the grid paper matches between the sheets of paper before taping them together and then cutting off the excess from the edges. I have my reference image that I put together from multiple images in the free open source image editor GIMP, and I made it the same aspect ratio as my canvas, but you can also crop the reference to the right aspect ratio at this point. If I count the squares on the bottom row of the graph paper sheet, it's 56.5 squares. Now, if I divide 56 by 8, I get a nice round number of 7. So I'll use 7 by 7 squares and it becomes an 8 by 10 grid. If you usually paint in the same size, you only have to figure this out once and you can even write it down and repeat the same thing for every sketch. And I'll recreate that on the reference photo. I'll show you 2 ways to make the grid. The first one will not save it on the photo. I'll turn on the grid by selecting Show Grid from the View menu, and then I'll set the grid from the Image menu by going to Configure Grid. The grid is set to pixels and inches. I'm gonna change it to centimeters so it's easier for me. My canvas is 40 centimeters wide and that divided by 8 is 5 centimeters. So I'll make 5 centimeter squares and see if that works. Not great, because my reference image is just the aspect ratio of the canvas, it's not actually the same dimensions. So I'll tweak this till I get an 8 by 10 grid. There's some trial and error here, but you can keep the grid configuration window open and just hit enter to try a new grid size. 2.5 centimeters is already better, but 2.675 is the best I can get. So I'll go with that. You can also change the color of the grid. When you export the photo, the grid will not be visible. So if you don't want to keep GIMP open while you sketch, there's another way you can save the grid permanently on the photo. Make a new transparent layer and move it on top. If you have a lower layer selected while you make the grid, it won't be visible. Select a new layer and go to Filters, Render, Pattern, Grid. Now, this one doesn't let me change the units to inches or centimeters, but in the previous grid I determined it's around 315 pixels, so I'll try that. This doesn't take decimals, so I can't get any closer than this to make the 8 by 10 grid. You can change the line width if you want the grid thicker or thinner and the color of the grid. And then you can export the image as PNG or JPEG with the grid on it. And there it is. Then I'll draw the same grid on a piece of craft paper with a ruler. A longer ruler would help a lot with this. And then I'm ready to start sketching. This does take some extra time while making a sketch, but I find that unless I'm drawing something very simple, there's a chance I'll regret not using the grid. I'll have the thing sketched and transferred onto the canvas or paper and I'll be painting it, and then I realize there's something off. The neck is too long, hands or legs are off, the face is not symmetrical, the eyes are crooked. Well, to be honest, I don't often make tight enough grids to get that much help with the placement of the eyes, and they sometimes end up a little crooked anyway. But you can help that by making a smaller grid for the face area. Another tip I use besides the grid method is looking at the sketch in a mirror or taking a photo of it and flipping the photo to see the mirror image, to see it with fresh eyes and spot the mistakes I need to fix. But if you want to make your sketch on a separate piece of paper before transferring it to the canvas, to not have to do all the erasing and redrawing directly on the canvas, here's a video on how I do it with graphite transfer paper. See you there!